So, good morning. We are here today. This will be the last day of learning before our summer break. We come back with Shem and Elul in September. And although, as Isser pointed out, we did conclude the Tanya, the entire thing yesterday, but there is concluding and there's concluding. And when Moshe Braun is not here and Ari Pfeffer is not here and Chaim Zev's not here, then we didn't conclude it. So we're going to reconclude it today. But more than concluding it, it's really a beginning, and this is really what I wanted to share with everybody. This sefer here, Tanya. This is the Rebbe gave me this Tanya. He gave it to me, I think, in 1982 or 84. I have it on the cover, which is torn off, as you see. And for most of our 2 years, Moshe, is it 2 years that was it longer than 2 years? I don't remember. Do you have any recollection, Moshe?
I'm not sure.
You're not
sure.
sure.
I don't remember.
Anyway, I think it's at least 2 years. We went through the entire thing. Personally, I must tell you, for me, it's a great simcha because I never did it. No, I do it in chitas like everyone else does it, But to learn it methodically and, although there's always more and deeper and better, but it was pretty good. I would say it was pretty good. And to go through it and teach it and have it recorded and have it online, which is for eternity, it's a great simcha. It's a great simcha for all of us, because without you, all of you, I wouldn't do it, and without me, you wouldn't do it. So, in this setting. So that's number one, that it is very special, and it is the 3 weeks. The Rebbe teaches us that we should make siyumim on the 9 days. I don't know if you can make a siyum of Tanya with a Kaddish. Some probably say you can, some say you can't, whatever. But one thing's for sure, we concluded it, before Tisha, the 9 days start Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh Av. And if someone asks, what is this Tanya about? So the Alter Rebbe, in the conclusion, I think, this is the way I see the connection between the end and the beginning. There's a concept brought in the Sforim, No'utz Tchilasam B'Seifan, V'Seifan B'Tchilasam. The beginning is wedged with the end, and the end is wedged with the beginning. And it's true in life. There's the beginning of the life cycle when a baby is born, and then there's the end of the life cycle when a person passes on. Is there a connection? What is the connection? So it's true in life, and it's true in Torah, and it's true in Chassidus, and it's true in everything you do. You have to find a connection between your childhood and your seniorhood, if there is such a word. It's all one large wholesome experience. It's not, I was a child and a teenager and a young adult and an older adult and a middle-aged adult, a midlife crisis. Those are, components. But if you want it to be good, if you want it to be strong, if you want it to be valuable and meaningful, especially for your children and grandchildren and family and all of that, and friends, then you have to put it all together. So what's the connection between the end of the Tanya here on page Kuf Samach Gimel in Kuntres in 163 in the regular Tanyas and the beginning? So the Alter Rebbe, in this letter, now I want to just recap the letter because many of you weren't here for this week. The Alter Rebbe gives Musar. Look at the beginning on page 324. Hocheach techiach zamisecha. That's a verse in the Torah which means scold. Shall you scold your friend, the other person, which classically means give them musar, what we call in Hebrew musar. And the Chazal say, the sages say, afilu me'abhamim, not just once, not twice, even if you have to do it 100 times, till they stop doing what they shouldn't do. Now, of course, that verse has been misused by many, and it's caused a lot of problems over the centuries, especially in America, post-Holocaust, where the old generation coming from the shtetl didn't understand the youth, didn't understand the counterculture, and many of them said it's either my way, and their way they always saw as the Torah way, or the highway. And that's a very narrow way of looking at this verse. And I don't have to tell you all in Eretz Yisrael, in Eretz Yisrael, but unfortunately, there are people who live this way right down the road from where you are in Bet Shemesh. It has to be their way. If it's not their way, it's the highway, protests, burning flags, on and on. At the same time, do we throw the baby out with the bathwater? No, we don't. We seek to integrate, to elevate, to teach, and to look at tochacha, as we said in the last few shiurim, beginning with yourself. The first thing you have to do before you give musar is ask yourself, am I the one to give musar? Am I truly a candidate to be the musar sayer? And we discussed the different criteria which the previous Rebbe brings in the discourse that he said and wrote in 1924. It's brought in Hayom Yom as well. Very important one. But I don't want to go there right now. But the first thing the Alter Rebbe says is, my friends, you're hurting yourself spiritually and physically. The Alter Rebbe is not just talking about Isser, a spiritual malady, but a physical malady, God forbid, comes because the Baal Tefillah and the congregation are rushing in davening, and they send up the wrong Baal Tefillah. In the previous letter, he spoke about they send up the right Baal Tefillah, and they cut and they, figuratively speaking, they cut his legs. How do they cut his legs? They pinch him, or they bang on the table, no, and they scream. In other words, get moving. You guys know your own shul, So the Alter Rebbe criticizes that in the previous letter. He says, don't do that. In this letter, he talks about setting up the wrong Baal Tefillah, who kind of goes along with the crowd. What does the crowd want to do? Rush. No. But I point out, he does say at the same time, the Baal Tefillah should not be a kratzer. He says not too fast and not too slow. So if you're going to a shul like we have here in Borough Park, we just spoke about the shul, and I'm sure you have it in Eretz Yisrael too, Emunas Yisrael, which is a 3.5 hour davening, I think daily, you're coming to a slow minyan, and it's your choice. If you don't want to be at that minyan, then don't daven there. But in a regular shul, Eish Kodesh, and this shul, the Karl, right? There is a certain, average way of davening. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. Number 2, he says, Moshe, both Moshes, that people should gather around the Baal Tefillah. In other words, and he says clearly, it's not that one person is learning Chassidus, one person is learning Daf HaYomi, another person is drinking coffee, a fourth person is reading the New York Times, and a fifth person speaking about what happened in Gaza. Sorry, friends, this is not the shul energy. That's what he says here. So by putting everyone together, a kind of around the Baal Tefillah, davening together, and he says another thing, B'koil Ram, out loud. Now he doesn't mean, he doesn't mean that, the Carlene stolen screaming. It's not what he means. Right? But he doesn't mean it should be a cemetery where you come into shul, you don't hear anybody, you don't hear anyone davening. B'koil Ram. Ashrei, Yoshrei, V'secho, Od, Hallelujah, Selo. Right. So these are things that he chastises his Hasidim. He's writing this to his Hasidim, to Lubavitchers, the Chabadniks, who have these shtiblach, these minyanim, and they're, not davening the way he wants them, and he to daven, and he tells them how they should be davening. And I promise you, it applies today as it did 200 years ago when he wrote this. And more so. I mean, in our shul, for example, Borough Park, we had a split in the shul. One of the things was whether you close the kava shtibel, the coffee, place where you get coffee, at when we start davening 9:30 or not. and we got an influx of young guys, good guys. They want it open because they come in 9:45 and 10. They're not here for Chassidus at 8 o'clock, but they don't care because they can hang out later. So they want a coffee. Okay, where is the coffee steeple? At that time, it was kind of part of the shul, and it makes noise. So the previous Gabbai, put his foot down. Well, they ousted him. They didn't oust him. He ousted himself, but they basically said, we're not interested in your way. So, put this scenario into this piece of Tanya here, and you ask yourself, who would the Tanya, who would the Alter Rebbe side with? The Jungelite, the youngsters, or the Gabbai, right? And we have a Gabbai here, and Yoni's somewhere, another Gabbai, So, but the Alter Rebbe is not fathomed by young and old and right and left and smart and not smart. The Alter Rebbe tells you the way it should be. Daven together.
I'm here, Rabbi. I'm here.
You're here. Okay.
I'm just not
That's fine. Important for you to hear this for your shul. So the Alter Rebbe is not fathomed by us. Okay. The Alter Rebbe is not going to make his decision based on who I'm, me, you. He says it the way the Torah is, and the Alter Rebbe says, daven's regular speed, not too fast, not too slow. Everyone should start at the same time. Be around the chazan. It doesn't mean you have to hover over the chazan's head. It's not what it means. It means, sit around, kind of to be involved in the tefillah. And truth be said, you all have davened and tasted this, the way the Sfardim daven. That to me would be more of what the Alter Rebbe is saying. Really. You come into a Sfardish shul, that's why I love going in and davening sometimes there. The togetherness and saying out loud the tefillah, it feels like we're davening. It's such a beautiful, powerful way of service. And in a sense, the Alter Rebbe is saying, not in a sense, he's saying, we Ashkenazim, we should be doing the same thing. Again, the nuances are different, but the concept's the same. So that's the first thing he said. The next thing he spoke about in this letter was the study of Talmud. And I spoke yesterday at length, I'm not going to go into it now, how Dafka by Chabad, Hasidim, more than other Hasidim, the study of Talmud was a primary issue. And I quoted yesterday, you listened to the shir from Mr. Kramer, who was one of the first Lubavitchers in America, who in 1925 was 125 years, I think, from Yutas Kislev or so. He wrote a letter to all the Lubavitcher shuls in the greater East Coast, Philly, Baltimore, and Chicago too. All where there was many Chabad Shtiblach, Nusach Ari, Nusach Yezhin, And he said, come to New York, we're making a grand siyum, Yutas Kislev, on Shas. And he writes, and we are different, that we do learn the Gemara. And it almost sounds to me, you have to read the letter, but it almost sounds to me like they put more of an emphasis on learning that than Hasidus. This was the Lubavitcher Hasidim in America at that time. So the Alter Rebbe here wants us to finish Shas every year. He says, I know you can't do it yourself. So every community, every shul, get together, a few shuls together, and finish the Shas. Hence, we have what's called the Chalukas HaShas on Yutas Kislev. And it's not too late to take a Masechta now. You can learn it in English. You can learn it deeper, or more cursory. But it's an Inyan. It comes from the Baal Tanya. It didn't start with our Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe. So it's in this letter, in the final letter of Tanya. Third point he speaks about, and it's not really done today, is that on Shabbos, you should say Psalm 119, the entire thing. And don't ask me why, but I have not seen this as a irregular minig. I have seen some Lubavitchers do it, but it is brought in this letter. And then the Alter Rebbe talks about the importance of learning and knowing the laws of Shabbos. Now it's very interesting here, where, he speaks so much about prayer, davening, then he talks about filling the Shas. It's like he has these three. Then he goes to, this idea of Shabbos. And he concludes the Tanya with the importance of keeping Shabbos. And he says the Shabbos has Zochar, Yom Shabbos al-Kache, and Shomor, guard Shabbos and remember Shabbos. So there is the literal saying, one goes on the mitzvah say, one goes on the mitzvah lo say Shvisa. Resting, you shouldn't, just Hashem says, just like I rest, you rest. Don't do work on Shabbos. That's Shomor. And Zochar is through the positive, through davening and learning and all that, right? The Alter Rebbe, that's Chazal. That's what the sages said. The Alter Rebbe takes it at a deeper level, and he says that Zochar and Shomar are what we call Pnimius and Chitzonius, the external and the internal. And he says there's the external of Shabbos. Don't work on Shabbos, right? Don't speak idle chatter on Shabbos, which is, I make it sound like we're all doing it. I told you the story with someone who was involved with Chabad years ago. Yitaka lived in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And he went to Chicago. There was, on business, he was a salesman. There was Rabbi Yankel Katz, famous Rabbi Yankel Katz, was a Lubavitcher. And he was a wealthy man, and he had a Chnosses Orchim house, a large house, on the west side of Chicago, which I visited, I told you about this past year, which was an experience. I still want to go back there, if it's safe. It has to snow. The day I went there was snowing, so everyone was out. Everyone was home, so I was able to feel safe. What a war zone. Anyway, no worse than the Bronx or Newark, right? Anyway, so listen to this. So he goes there for Shabbos, and he notices that the husband, the host, is not talking to his wife. So he thought maybe Friday night he's tired, he's groggy, yeah. It's late, Shabbos morning, Shabbos afternoon. And all he says is, no. He came back to New York and he said, I found the best recipe for Sholem Bayis. What happened? This Yid learned with another chassid in Chicago, Shlomo Palmer was his name. They were chassidim with the previous Rebbe in the 1930s and 40s. And they learned L'Kutei Torah Pashat Tzav of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe quotes a Yerushalmi. The Gemara Yerushalmi says, Bekushi, hitiru, ledaber, divrei Torah b'Shabbos. With difficulty, our sages permitted us to speak words of Torah on Shabbos. Bekushi, divrei Torah. What does that imply? If it's not divrei Torah, it's divrei Chayil, you're not allowed to speak on Shabbos. From that day on, he decided, no more talking on Shabbos. It's no, or maybe, challah, sakin, you know what I'm saying. That's, now, when you find someone like that today, let me know. I don't think there's anyone like, but there are people that aren't careful, and the Alter Rebbe speaks about it here. He really does. But that's called the chitzonius of Shabbos. What's the pnimius of Shabbos? Shvisa b'machshava. In other words, you can close your mouth from eating and from talking, but in your mind, you're talking and you're eating. And the mind is working full force. We know that Shabbos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world not through dibur, like he did through the week, through the 10 utterances, each day another utterance. But on Shabbos, it was through machshava. It's creation through machshava. So we have to take that's the inner aspect of Shabbos. So the Alter Rebbe, as he concludes the Tanya here, he mentions both things. His last words of the Tanya is Kizeh u'mazeh, which is the Rebbe asked in 1962 at the Yutas Kislev Habring and asked a very strong question. Kizeh u'mazeh means one is opposite the other. The good is opposite the bad. Why does the Baal Tanya finish with a negative thought? Zeh u'mazeh. There is good and there's bad. That means he said, he doesn't say what the bad is, but he means basically that the inner aspect of Shabbos is the good aspect. And opposite that, you have thinking inappropriate, whatever, secular thoughts on Shabbos about your business, about your stocks, and about this, and about that, right? So the Rebbe, we know in Chazal, we always try finishing with something tov, something good, not negative. You want the concluding punchline to be positive. So how is it the Alter Rebbe seems to finish otherwise? And the Rebbe explained that the Alter Rebbe, yes, it sounds, I mean, the quote, Kizelu Mazeh, has a negative connotation, but the reason is to make clear how careful you have to be with Shabbos. And if you don't make it clear and you beat around the bush, people walk away thinking this way, that way. And when it comes to a bottom line of conduct, you need to be very clear, and it's true in education. If you don't say, I remember once, 2001, they had to call the shofar. We spoke about this on our shiur many times, where the self-improvement, Warner Earhart style of self-improvement and all that, and it was crept into the Chabad community in Crown Heights, called Call of the Shofar. And the Rabbanim and the Mashpim were against it. They called a meeting, I think it was December 24th, I remember it, the night, and Rabbi Yoel Kahn, the Mashpia, spoke, and Rabbi Shochat, the Rosh Yeshiva of Los Angeles, the Yeshiva Chabad in Los Angeles, and Rabbi Heller, one of the three Rabbanim of Crown Heights. He didn't speak, but he was there. And it was 1,500 people. It was the ballroom in Ola Torah in Crown Heights, where they make the weddings. It was packed. And Rabbi Shochat spoke like 45 minutes to an hour, a long time. Rabbi Yoel spoke first, and he repeated, and he explained what the Rebbe and Hasidus says about the problem and the issue and how to handle it. 10, 15 minutes he spoke. Then Shochat gets up and speaks for an hour, and then we thought it's over, okay? Rabbi Yoel asked the moderator, the MC, he wants to say something, and he said, Rabbi Shochat spoke for an hour, and sometimes because of so long, you forget the punchline, the bottom line. So he got up again, which he wouldn't do usually, and he repeated in 5 minutes, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, 1, 2, 3, this is what should be done, this is what not should be done, etc. So the Alter Rebbe, here at the end of Tanya, has to speak the same way. Otherwise, you walk away with philosophy and maybe, he's very, 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 very clear about what he wants or what he doesn't want, what he suggests. Now, what's the kesher, what's the connection to the beginning of Tanya? Tanya b'seif Perek Gimel Dinim Mashbina Yisai. The first chapter of Tanya introduces a concept called Pnimius, which is the idea that the Alter Rebbe speaks about here at the end. You see, the addition of Hasidic Judaism and the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe is the whole focus on Pnimius. Until the Baal Shem Tov, it was about, the legalistic. This is the code, this is what you do, this is what you don't do. The whole idea of focusing on the inside, on the soul, on the neshama, on the Pnimius, was not part of the jargon and the lifestyle of Jews until then. It wasn't. And for good reason, because it wasn't so necessary, but it wasn't. Then came in the 1648-49 the Helmenitsky pogroms in Poland, with the false Shabtai Tzvis, with the false messiahs of Shabtai Tzvi and Pesach Tzvi Frank, and the destruction and terrible devastation spiritually and physically to Jews throughout Eastern Europe. The Baal Shem Tov comes along and says, hey, it's time now to talk about the soul, the neshama, the Pnimius. That's Tanya. Tanya is a book, a study of Pnimius. So what we have from this is, although I look a certain way and I speak a certain way and even I behave a certain way, who am I? Oh, who you are. Go into the Tanya, you'll find out who you are. And guess what? You'll find out it's not your practice. It's not your speech. It's not even your thought. You're someone totally different. You have a neshama. I have a neshama. My neshama is beautiful and pristine. Let me take this neshama out. And that's what the Alter Rebbe did. He takes out for us, through his teachings, the Pnimius. And that's the direct connection to the end of Tanya. So this is the message and the conclusion of this sefer that we learned for over 2 years. And we spent a lot of time on this. What is the message? And this is it. It's clear. It's clear. Look to all of us. Look, our Pnimius. We wouldn't be here if not for our Pnimius. In other words, the Pnimius is the Ikar Adam. The Pnimius is where it counts, not the Chitzonius, not the external. Now, at the same time, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't better our externalities, our behavior, and our clothing, and our speaking. It's all important. Like I've said many times, you come into a shul. Yes, there is a dress code. At the same time, someone is not dressed that way, you don't chase them out. They don't know better. You work with them, right? So, but at the same time, those that do know better, it's Shabbos, it's Yom Tov, So I don't, Chas v'shalom, want to make light of the external, but we have to know that the Pnimius is the Iker. This is the my thoughts on the connection between the beginning and the end. And in Mitzvah Shem, we're going to start. I decided to learn a Kuntres called Hecholzu of the Rebbe Rashab that he said in 1899. In Lubavitch on Simchas Torah. It's a very important mimer. It speaks about Avas Yisrael, but based on Chabad Chassidus. And it's been translated in English in various publications. I think the Hasidic Heritage series, which Moshe, by the way, Isser says he gave to you his Svarim. So you probably have it in the Hasidic Heritage series, so take it out. That's a reminder that you probably forgot about, but Isra said that the other day. But then there is the volume that I showed, and Moshe is going to look into it if you can get it in the Kfar Chabad.
Road trip.
What'd you say?
Road trip.
Road trip. Yeah, what, Chaim, you have it? And also, by the way, I mean, the mimer is in the regular Maimorim in Hebrew. If you want just all Hebrew, the book of Maimorim of the Rashab of 5659, which is 1899. The mimer is there. So if one doesn't need the English, doesn't want it, just want, because I'm going to be learning from the Hebrew and giving English translation. But it would, I think, you would benefit if you had that English translation to review it and to look at it, and they give footnotes. They did a very nice job. They put out. Let me show you what they put out. Hold on. Here, this is the volume I'm talking about that I guess Sikhs in English put out. You see, so it's lessons in Kuntres Echolzu, a treatise on Avas Yisrael by the Rebbe Rashab. So we will learn this, and it'll take us a little while, not as long as Tanya. But I remember the Rebbe one year distributed the mimer, just in Hebrew, this to people as a gift and as something to learn. So it's an important document. Anything anyone would like to say about Tanya or anything else, please. Ari Pfeffer.
I want to say Mazel Tov to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mazel Tov.
Thank you. Shekoyach to everyone here for going the long trek. It's amazing. We started this Kailul 2017, I believe, Elul, and it's, the 2025, which Hashem will be learning in Elul. It's a long time. And there are more participants in the Hasidus part with me than when I was live in Ramat Bet Shemesh. That's the beauty of social media and online, and you can be wherever you are. And many times, Yoni, Moshe, others are driving, and what'd you say?
Got to thank COVID for that as well.
Yeah. We should never go back to COVID. Chas v'sholom, never. But you're right. Okay, everyone have a great Shabbos and a great summer, and we'll reconnect and be in touch. Sei gesund. Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.